just so that we have enough time for questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll work through our presentation and then come back to questions. So let's get that going here. All right. So friends, we're here today to talk about academic excellence without burnout. It sounds like this is something you are all sensing or hearing explicitly from your kids, so you're in the right place. We're going to talk about the things that are precursors to academic excellence and that will help your students avoid burnout. I want to say at the outset here that I have to make a disclaimer that you cannot time manage your way back from burnout. You cannot study yourself out of burnout. You have to take a different approach. And if it is the case that your child may have a mental health challenge, I do encourage you to seek the appropriate help for them, because, the stuff we're going to talk about today, really executive functions and a holistic way of thinking about academic wellness, can get you part of the way there. But if there is a mental health challenge or some sort of extenuating circumstance, you want to really make sure you get them the support that they need. All right. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about what colleges are looking for. And this is probably not in the format that you're normally thinking about that. So I'm hoping to kind of change your mind, open your eyes a little bit about it. And how sometimes parents are getting in the way. And I don't want to lay the blame at your feet. You guys are doing the most already, but I want you to think a little bit differently about your role. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the science of behavior change and what executive function coaching really looks like. Some examples of small and big interventions and kind of the results of those interventions, and then where you can actually start today working with your own kids. And then, as I mentioned, we'll come back to Q&A. So let's get into this. I want to break down elements of excellence here. And excellence means different things to different people, and that's okay. It's actually the way we want it to be. But when we think about what colleges are looking for, we're thinking about, oh my gosh, we have to have excellent grades, excellent test scores, all the extracurriculars, some kind of leadership. They need to be an outstanding citizen, doing all this community service. There's a lot of that stuff. But I kind of want to think beyond those check boxes and activities, tangible activities that they're doing, to think more about really what are colleges trying to assess by having your kid report on all of those different pieces of their lives. And yes, a big part of it is academic skills, their ability to learn new things, to read, write, think critically, make decisions, things like that. But I want to draw your attention away from that for a little bit, because I know you're thinking about all of that, and so are your kids, to think about these other things. So physical health, how they're fueling their body, how often they're moving their body, having an appropriate amount of sleep for their developmental stage. The physical environment, do they have a clear designated study space that is quiet and free of distractions, that kind of thing. We also want to talk about their mental health, their emotions, their ability to regulate their emotions, self-esteem, stress tolerance, good boundaries, self-care, resilience. Self-advocacy skills are really, really big because they can open the door to a lot of these other things. And then social health. We are social beings. We cannot do things just on our own. We cannot isolate ourselves without having some detrimental effects. So we want to make sure that they've got communication skills. They are healthy in their relationships, whether that's with you or siblings, other adults, family members, friends, and that they have a sense of community. And this is one of the things that actually really concerns me when I see teenagers nowadays. They feel like everybody is their competition. So they're a little bit guarded. They're holding their cards close to their chest. They don't want, their competition to see them struggling, to hear that they're worried about something. So they're putting on a show. And that also means they're not getting the support they need. They're not getting the validation that other people are struggling with this thing too. And actually, if we start talking to each other, we maybe can help each other or change the tenor of this dynamic. So really work with your kids on making sure that they do have a sense of community. Now, I don't want this to feel like I'm giving you this like whole other list of things to worry about. You're already worried about, some of the bigger factors. And honestly, when we're talking about teenagers, high school students, this should start being less of your responsibility as a parent and more of your child's responsibility in terms of taking care of themselves and setting themselves up for success. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. We've got to build towards it. And we'll talk today about how you can start to do that. But I want to remind you, oh, sorry, before I remind you of anything, what we're talking about here is their executive functions. You may have heard this term. I want to give you just a quick definition. This is sort of like air traffic control. This is the higher order part of their brain that actually regulates how they spend their time, how they're behaving, what they're thinking about, and their emotions. So you might see this as showing up in their time management or their flexibility when they're trying to solve a problem, their follow through, their impulse control, and got a whole bunch of other factors here. And the set of these skills taken together we call executive functions. And nobody is born with these fully developed. Everybody can continue working on them, even adults, maybe especially adults. They are developed through experience and practice. So your student actually has to try things, struggle with things, figure this out for themselves, and strengthen these abilities. And strong executive function skills don't just help with the learning, they actually help people stick to healthy habits and then reduce stress. So we've got this virtuous cycle of, if you strengthen those if you strengthen those executive function skills, your child will be able to stick to the healthy diet or healthy sleeping regimen that they've set out for themselves. And that's going to enable their performance more, strengthen their impulse control even more because they're not just hungry or tired or whatever it is. And then, things are going to get better from there and it's going to snowball in this really positive way. But now I'll get back to the reminder. This is not something that you can just force on your kid. You can't just download it into their brain. And you shouldn't. So I have a podcast called Don't Force It. It's one of my favorite phrases, but you can't force this. How do you force somebody to have better impulse control? You just can't. And if you could, you really shouldn't, because like I said, our kids are on their way to their independence, their adulthood. You can't be their outsourced executive function forever. So one of the things that needs to happen is for you to take a good look at what your role is and redefine it and really understand how you can best help prepare your kid for that next stage, right? So maybe you are some of these things right now, but we want to start thinking about ways that you can untangle yourself from it. You shouldn't be homework police. You shouldn't be their college counselor. You shouldn't be their therapist. You should not be their secretary or their butler, right? And there are days when you're going to have to do any number of these things. But on the whole, you want to do less and less of these things for your child as they grow older. And there's research that shows that around age 13, your kids don't want this from you anymore. You've noticed this. They don't want to listen to you. You may know what they need to do, but you know that just telling them that is just not going to be productive, right? They are trying to figure out their independence and do things on their own. So we need you to make room for them to do that. And yeah, they're going to mess it up. And you're going to mess up too. But they're still at home. You're still there to help them and to support them through whatever they're going through. So they can't really make too many bad mistakes, right? You got to give them a chance to practice these things. And so as you move away from this you're not column, you're going to move more into the you are column, where you are a supporter. And they can call you in for help. If they call you in for help, you can collaborate with them. You are their champion. You're their cheerleader. You can still be their confidant. I mean, after all, you're their parent. You're their closest relationship. You really want to maintain that as things, get more and more dynamic in high school and adolescence. You really want to maintain that clear communication, open relationship, and that emotional bond. And you are a role model. As much as they may roll their eyes at you and be like, oh gosh, mom, I hate when you do this thing, they are looking to you to understand how to shape their lives, how to move into being an adult. So you have this ability to model for them the changes that you would like to see in them and show them how those changes have impacted your life. And instead of just teaching them how to do this, you can just sort of demonstrate it to them. And that's going to lead to a better relationship and probably better learning. All right. This is hard. I do want to know. I want to acknowledge that it is hard to shift your role. You've been in one role for 13, 14, 15, however old your kid is. You've been in these roles for that long. It is very hard to change. Right. And we are talking about behavioral change here. So I'm going to talk to you about what happens if you don't do that. And then we'll talk about how do you actually do this, and I'll demonstrate it for you as well. But on a grand scale, this is what we're talking about, right? The danger is failure to launch. If a parent doesn't start to decrease their involvement and their direct, maybe micromanaging or direct doing for their child will never grow on that scale of independence, and they will be stunted. And they may still get good grades, graduate from high school, go to a great college, but there is going to be some interdependence there that is not serving their growth as an adult, as an independent adult. And that's what we call failure to launch, right? Both parties kind of need to take their trajectories and not do too much for the other, right? We don't want to see failure to launch. We really want, happy, well-adjusted kids who can handle some stress, who know how to navigate difficult situations on their own, and know that they can call you in for help if they need it, but not depend on you to sort of swoop in and solve all their problems for them. All right, let's go ahead here. Now, before I get into how do you do this, I'm going to try to show you what we do, and I'm going to ask you to do something that maybe feels a little silly, but I'm going to ask you to imagine right now, think of your biggest challenge. Really think about that thing that is just a pain in your butt, thorn in your side, the biggest obstacle to your happiness, and think about all the energy and time that this challenge has taken up for you, so much space in your life, right? When you have got the clear picture of this thing, I want you to type ugh in the chat so we can all just vent about this terrible thing. We all have at least one or two of these things. Let's think about it and then tell me when you got it. Colin has got it right away. Who else has their challenge in mind? Okay. Yep. Keep going. I really want you to come with me on this journey. I know it's a little silly, but we're going to do it. I got 2 exclamation points on that one. Okay, great. We've got our challenge. Now, just imagine for a second, just consider the possibility, just magically, whatever this thing is, it just flies away. It just totally disappears from your life. Okay? Don't worry about how, when, whatever. It just is gone. Now, how would you feel if that challenge just disappeared? Tell me in the chat. How does it feel? Happy? Relieved? Oh, yeah. Woo, weight off. Yes. Few for sure. The first time I ever did this exercise, actually with one of my colleagues who's a coach, she actually saw my shoulders drop and some worry lines from my forehead just melt away, right? Relaxed. Yeah. It's a good feeling, right? And what I've just done is something that we call visioning. right? And I'm not asking you, what do you want to be in 10 years? I'm asking you to imagine a world where your biggest challenges are no longer holding you back, right? I'm not telling you how to solve them or what to do, any of that. I'm just asking you to like lock into the feeling of having things be different in a way that you want, right? And it's powerful. Um, we have energetic here. Somebody's really energized by this idea, right? And that's often what happens with the teenagers we coach. We get them to imagine a world where their challenge is no longer a problem. And they get so motivated by that vision of a future that they find the resilience and grit and perseverance to start working on that challenge. Right now, here's our model of behavior change. Is sort of the science of behavior change. It's not just flip a switch, I do an exercise, and now your life is different. That's not how reality works. It's a process. And where people start is right here in pre-contemplation. Maybe they're not even aware there's a problem, right? There's no intention of changing a behavior. When they get to contemplation, they're starting to be more aware, but they're not like, oh, this is what I need to do. Here's my plan. They're just like, oh, yeah, this thing kind of sucks. And then we move in closer to action where we're preparing to make changes. We're evaluating, solutions, seeing what other people have done. And then we take an action, and we've got to maintain that action to build this habit. And it's going to be a roller coaster. You are going to relapse. And then we learn something from that relapse. And then the next time we try better, right? We've learned something. So that's why there's this upward spiral in the middle. And what I just did with that visioning exercise is I nudged you closer to action, right? I'm sure many of your kids, even if they have a diagnosis, are not speaking explicitly about the challenge that's in front of them. Whatever you see as their biggest challenge, maybe they're aware of it, but they're not talking about it. Like, gosh, I wish I could wake up on time in the morning, or hand my homework in, or whatever it is, right? They're probably not speaking in explicit language about this. But if we were to do that visioning exercise with them, all of a sudden they just like jumped ahead. Oh, if I change this thing, everything would be different. It really moves them towards action, but also gets their buy-in, because this is a vision that they have created, right? They've identified the challenge, and they've identified the world that they want to live in, right? And so a parent can't do much about this. So, I'll tell you some tips and some strategies. This has to be an internal process, right? But what a parent can do is create the conditions for lasting change. You do that through things like scaffolding, right? Doing it with them for a little bit until they can do it on their own, almost like, riding a bike. You're holding the bike for a little bit and then you let go. Modeling, we talked about that already. And then mentoring, right? It's not a prescriptive teaching relationship. It is a mentorship relationship. And it's often not with a parent or a direct family member. It's usually with somebody else that maybe you trust as a parent, but the kid is really looking up to that person and accepting of their mentorship. So in my industry, we call this executive function coaching, right? And I just kind of want to give you a sense of like what that landscape looks like. Some places, they just give you a workbook and it's a bunch of worksheets and the kid's supposed to work through it on their own. And then, I don't know, magic happens. Sometimes it's video lessons, like they'll prescribe you, okay, watch this and watch that. The thing with those two is that, if your kid has got an executive function issue, they probably are not, together enough to really be disciplined working through that workbook or watching the video and implementing it, right? The challenge that they're trying to solve is actually going to hold them back from those solutions. So the other set of executive function coaching is usually one-on-one live sessions with a person, over Zoom, sometimes online, and sometimes in person. I would say post-COVID, most of this is online, but every once in a while you find someone who can come to your house and actually look at your kids' study area or help them organize their backpack, things like that. And we have like a couple of different maybe postures. That's my second column here. Some of them are really a crutch. You bring in this person and they're actually doing the things for your kid. So your kid is not learning skills. They're not gaining independence. They are getting more dependent on somebody else. Maybe it's not you. Maybe that's a good thing. But they're still leaning on somebody else. They can't stand on their own 2 feet. I mentioned that a lot of these places are very prescriptive. They'll say, here's a calendar, go use it. Or I'm going to give you this planner, or here's my system for doing this thing. And they teach a kid how to use that tool or system. And then the kid is on their own, expected to keep up with it. Right. That may have some initial positive impact because there's something happening and your kid's motivated to change it, but it's usually not lasting, mostly because it's not organic, it's not natural to the student, it's not something the student had a part in creating for themselves, right? Which is part of the empowerment and confidence building process. So our third sort of posture here is a true coaching posture, where no one's coming in to teach your kid and say you did it right or you did it wrong. It's asking really powerful questions, guiding a student through this process of gradual realization and collaboration so that they're creating solutions for themselves. There's a lot more sticking power there. The kind of credentials that you'll see, this is my third column, a lot of people who do executive function coaching are actually speech and language pathologists. Part of that is because our development of language starts very early on in the childhood development trajectory, and the SLP has sort of the training and the ways of relating to young kids as they're building these things. Right. So SLPs often offer executive function coaching, usually for younger kids, I don't know, maybe second grade and below, something like that. Some will do it with older kids as well. And then you've got other people who have a coaching certification. They have some ADHD or executive function training that may be specific to their organization. There is no real licensing body for executive function coaching, but these are the two sort of most common types of training you'll see in a firm's background. And then in terms of rates, the average range is really 150 to 350 an hour. Most of them do charge by the hour, usually recommend an hour to an hour and a half a week, though I will say shorter, more frequent sessions are really recommended here. So you may still get to a total of an hour, but it might be 4 15-minute sessions over the course of the week, or one longer one maybe on a Sunday to plan, and then a shorter one later in the week to check in on progress. Right, the touch point is really, really important, because that's that consistency that can help a student really stay on track as they're learning a new skill or building a new habit. And typically a coaching relationship lasts for about 3 to 6 months. There are definitely people who do this longer. Very rarely some people do it shorter, but behavior change takes time. Right? We know it takes at least 3 weeks to build a habit. But first, you got to figure out what the problem is, what the root of that problem is, try out a bunch of solutions, and then turn that solution into a habit, right? So we do need a little bit of time. There are no real overnight successes here when it comes to coaching. So that's what this sort of world looks like. And I want to tell you a little bit more about what we do at Signet. We call it academic coaching. It is broader than executive functions only, though we deal with a lot of executive function challenges. Our coaching is very student-centered. So this is more on that pure coaching posture, where we're not saying, hey, your mom told me you have trouble with time management. We are sitting in a meeting with the student and any other stakeholders, including you, to say, what do we see here? What are the challenges? We always let the student go first. Let them name their challenges, because those are the things they're actually motivated to change. And there may be a whole bunch of other challenges that you see, but if we start with any of those, your kid's going to lose the buy-in, right? We really want to start with that low-hanging fruit. They're already motivated to change this thing. Let's help them build some confidence, and let's let them lead the way. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? Help them grow into adults who can make decisions for themselves. And so this is a great place to practice that. It is totally judgment free. Even if we say, okay, we built this system for your managing your homework, you're going to go use it and report back to me on Wednesday how this went. And they come back and they're like, yeah, I didn't do anything. There's never I'm so disappointed in you, or what happened? You told me you were going to do this. Now I can't trust you. Like that is totally irrelevant to this relationship. It's actually very counterproductive. And what we do is we treat it as data. Okay, you didn't do what you thought you were going to do. Let's try to figure out why. Did you have a really big fight with your best friend? Did you get sick? Did you realize as you got started, something is just off about this system? It's not going to work for you. Let's reflect on this and let's learn from it so that when we try again, because we are going to try again, we do it better, right? So instead of judgment, it's data. And then we really specialize in teenagers with ADHD, executive function challenges, and or loads of stress. You don't have to have ADHD or executive function challenges to be stressed out about school. And in fact, some of our most meaningful coaching relationships are with students who otherwise have very strong executive functions, but for whatever reason, school is just not bringing them joy. They don't feel like they have a clear purpose, understand their why, their motivation, or what comes next. And those are the kinds of things that we work with them on, because our coaching is very strengths-based, values-based. It's like very much turning inwards so that you can then apply your skills and strengths to the challenges in front of you. It obviously includes a lot of reflection. At the end of the day, that's probably the biggest skill that we're trying to teach students, is how to reflect. And then action planning and accountability, right? That's where we're really different from those places that just give you a calendar and walk away. We're going to stick with you and help you adjust the system, adjust your solution so that it does stick and that you have a habit that will last. And when we're doing this, they're kind of like two parallel tracks that we're working on, right? So we are building new habits. We're identifying problems and replacing old habits with these new ones. So we have to envision the change. We've got to get to the root of the problem. And then we're going to reflect and iterate until we kind of got our right solution. And that's going to lead us into an ability to always identify and solve our own problems. We can celebrate progress together, right? Our human brains are really wired to focus on the negative. It's really helpful to have a coach who can celebrate your progress with you. We are going to come away understanding how your sleep habits affect your ability to do well on the SAT. Things like that, right? Understanding how all these things are interconnected. You can't sacrifice those sort of underlying healthy habits to get the A, because you're going to sabotage yourself, right? And really what I'm trying to do with students is help them define success on their own terms, right? There's certain milestones that colleges definitely want students to be able to hit, right? You've got to graduate, get some good grades. But there's so many different paths to success, however you define it. And so the more students can start to reflect on, what does success actually mean for me? What does a successful life look like for me? They will stop fixating so much on just getting into college. They're going to think about, well, what is this or that college program going to enable me to do in my life? Right? How do I want to design my life? Because college is really just the beginning of it. And I think broadening their perspective a little bit is very, very helpful. So the parallel track that I was talking about is the limiting beliefs, right? Sometimes the way we think about things is actually the thing that's standing in our way of changing something or of solving the problem. So we want to explore their attitudes. And procrastination and perfectionism are two really common and good examples of this. Thinking that it has to be perfect before you can even show somebody who's there to help you with it is not a helpful attitude, right? Let's explore that and see where it comes from. And, we're not therapists, and we definitely have like a clear line there where things cross into that territory where you need to go talk to a mental health professional about this. But we can help them explore those attitudes to a point where we can get some productive solutions out of it. We do a lot of like mindfulness challenges, and this is not just, I want you to meditate 20 minutes a day. It might be every time you start to feel hot in your face, I want you to look around the room and name 5 things you can see, 3 things you can smell, and 2 things you can touch, right? That's mindfulness right there. You're recentering on your present moment. And that can really help stop a student from going into one of those spirals, which I'm sure you all are aware of. And then the other thing that we do with limiting beliefs is build some good routines and do some habit stacking. So maybe every morning they're brushing their teeth, they've got Post-it notes on their bathroom mirror with some, positive mantras or things that they need to remember, instead of relying on themselves and putting so much pressure on themselves. Like, I should be able to remember all of these things. I shouldn't have to write it down. Like, dismantling that belief and showing them that there are tools and there are routines that you can insert into your day that will accomplish that goal. And you don't have to be so hard on yourself, right? And really what this is doing is helping us get out of our own way, embrace that growth mindset, revise our relationship to struggle, which is really tied in with a growth mindset. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we practice. And it's going to increase their confidence and give them things that they can rely on when a different challenge comes up, right? They're going to know, oh, I figured this thing out. The next time something hard happens, I have faith that I can also figure that out too. I have a system for this. So I'm going to give you some examples now, and then I'll break for questions in a minute. These are examples of small interventions, right? We're getting into finals and APs, the end of the school year, and it may feel like, oh, it's too late to do any of this stuff, or this might feel like a burden to put on my student at this moment. But actually, there are some small things that we could do really quickly that would relieve a lot of this burden, right? So one of the stories I love to tell is about a better morning routine. And I have a free gift for all you all. That's about revising a morning routine for your student. There was a student who is a very strong student. We worked with her a couple of years ago, and she had great grades and she was doing all these things. She was generally pretty happy about her life. But the biggest challenge she found was that she could never get to school on time. She had tried so many things. Her mom was just like tearing her hair out. Like, what are we going to do with you? How can you not get to school on time? And so she worked with one of our coaches. And as they explored what the chain of events was in the morning, they realized that, she had this really cozy bed and she didn't want to get out of it because it was cold in her room. And so what they figured out to do was, she had like this little mini coffee machine she put in the other corner of her room, and it was on a timer, and she'd set it up at night. And so in the morning it would brew coffee and the smell of the coffee would wake her up, and she would have to cross the room to get to it. And she had a blanket on the table right next to her bed, so that when she got out of bed, she could put this other blanket on and stay warm as she went across the room to get her coffee. And, this is an exemplary story. It's not always this easy, but it worked like a charm, right? We figured out the first domino, her getting out of bed in the morning. We solved it there, and then everything else fell into place, right? And she didn't have to rush to school. She wasn't so stressed in the morning. She got there, had some time for herself in the morning. So she was like really relaxed and like ready for her day, right? And that's the kind of thing that you could do right now, and it might change things for your kid tomorrow, right? And then, I've got some other examples here too that might take a little bit longer, but there are better ways to take notes. There are ways you can teach a student to study, to track their tasks, that are pretty simple, really. And the simpler the solution, the better, right? That's the ones that really stick. They're easy to do. It's not such a big lift to make a change. But we do have bigger interventions, right? I have students who worked with us for quite a while, and they end up building out this very elaborate system of interconnected tools and routines to stay on the ball. And we build them like kind of a dashboard tracker so they can track this. And they do a semester reflection, they do a month reflection, weekly reflection, and a daily reflection. And it's a really beautiful thing. They're so on the ball. They see assignments and tests way ahead of time. They know exactly how to manage their calendar, and they've got great relationships in place to help them stay accountable. But that does take time, right? You've got to iterate and be creative with every single solution, and turn it into sort of an elegant system that a student can manage. You don't want the management of that system to be like a full-time job, right? It should just be natural. Uncovering a sense of purpose and personal values does also take time. And if things are on fire, like they've got an AP test in 2 weeks, this is probably not something we're going to try to talk about, right? They're just not in the right mindset to talk about it. But over the summer or on a school break is a great time to think about that, right? What can we learn from what's happening at school, how you want to show up in the world that would help us define this set of personal values or really tap into what motivates you. And similarly, developing an inspiring vision for the future beyond college, as I was talking about earlier, is a thing that takes some time. But if they can do it, especially if they are a little bit earlier in high school, that really sets them up for an excellent, smooth college process because we know what we're going after, right? We understand their values, we understand what they want to be set up for. And of course, those things may change as they grow older. I mean, they're teenagers, right? But they have a process, they have a framework that they can fall back on so that they can always kind of update their purpose, update their vision, and make decisions accordingly. Right. Well, it does take a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more space. So that might be something we would start over a summer. And you've probably gotten a sense of this already, but like our real secret sauce here is that we use the pure coaching model of motivational interviewing. We are never telling a student, hey, do this. We are saying, sounds like if I can reflect back to you what you're saying, you have a problem with X. What have you seen other people do to solve that kind of problem? Or what do you think you want to try to do it differently next time? And then, through our questioning, we'll guide them. And if they're truly clueless on this, we will offer a suggestion. We will ask them for permission to offer a suggestion before we just offer it. And it creates this really trusting relationship. They know that our agenda is their agenda. It's not mom or dad's agenda. It's not the school's agenda. It's not a college agenda. It's what is it that you want to focus on? I'm going to help you direct all of your attention and resources to solving that problem. And our mentors, our coaches are just really awesome people, right? They're people that you probably would all say, oh, these are mentors. They all went to great schools. They have a lot of volunteering, great character, share our set of values. And students just think they're cool. They're impressive people, but they're never like, arrogant or judgmental or lording their credentials or smarts over somebody. They're really there to connect with the student and meet them where they are, which is my last point. A lot of these coaching programs ask students to be someone they're not to start the program, right? If we've got a kid with real-time management issues, I know it might take a few extra nudges to get them to a meeting on time. Right. So we can't let their challenges stand in the way of getting the help that they need. So we really want to meet them where they are. And gradually we will bring them up together. Right. But it's that sense that we're there to partner with them that really helps students stick through it, because sometimes this can be really hard, but they really do value having a partner of their own who doesn't have an agenda. Okay. So now we get to where can you start with your student, right? If you're not sure they're ready to start working with a coach or even know what their problems are, you have some work to do in understanding your role vis-a-vis theirs, right? And one of the best places to start is by having some agreements with your child. And this is a fancy way of saying talk to them and get on the same page. And I know that can be hard with a teenager, but if you come at it in a moment where, nothing is on fire, they're not having a meltdown, maybe you're driving them somewhere and it's like a relaxed time. You're not confronting them. You're saying, hey, I know that you've got a lot on your plate and I want to be able to help you, but I also want to let you spread your wings a little bit. So can we talk about where you want my help or how you can ask me for help in a moment that you need it? Can we just come to some agreements? And it could be as simple as, okay, here are all the things that I have to do, Mom. I want your help with this, this, and this. It could also be, let's set a code word. When I really need your help, I'm just going to say this code word, right? So, you know your kids, figure out how to approach this with them, but come to some clear agreements about when you're going to step in and when you're not going to step in unless they ask you. Right. And that's going to, just the fact that you're coming to them like this will show them that you trust them. And that can be amazing for the dynamic there. Right. And then when they are struggling with something or something goes wrong, try to approach the situation with some curiosity. Right. You may know exactly how to solve this problem or how you would solve the problem, but that may not be the way they feel comfortable solving the problem or even aware that that's a way that they could solve the problem, right? So approach it with some curiosity. If they're late to school or they forget that they had a test, say, I wonder what happened there. Can you kind of talk me through it? And then just ask sort of open-ended questions. Do your best to leave the judgment at the door until you can help them see what the root of this problem was, right? Because that's going to help them stay open to you. They're not going to feel judged by you. They're going to say, oh, mom's curious about this too. And that will help. And then the final one, though, is probably the most important one, is compassion. This is both compassion for your child, but also compassion for you. You know, you're entering a new stage, a new role, and you probably won't get it right. And that's okay. Nobody does. So you have to have some compassion for yourself, right? That you're not going to be able to fix this in some preset timeline, or you're probably not always going to say the right thing. You're going to lose your temper. You are going to swoop in sometimes, right? You are learning a new habit too, right? So you need to practice it and you need to be gentle with yourself and also help your child be gentle with themselves, right? They've built up a lot of pressure and expectations. Whether or not you have put that on them is sort of in the air in high school. So help them have some compassion for their own learning process, right? Nobody is perfect at something the first time they try it. We've got to practice. We've got to stick with it. We've got to build the skills. We've got to build the muscle, right? You can't go into a gym and expect to bench press 200 pounds your first day, right? We start small. We learn form. We do, light reps until we can graduate to the next level and the next level and the next level, right? That's the same thing that's happening here when we're building skills. All right. I'm going to open up for questions here, but I want to give you this wellness guide where I'm going to give you the morning routine worksheet and a how-to video for your kid, really, but you can use it too on, how do you look at your morning routine and think about what's the best order and what's a system that I can use for this. And you can use it for an evening routine as well. And gives you a sense of how to use this reflection process on any challenge they have. And I'm also going to give you top parent communication strategies to help your kids get over the 3 biggest obstacles for them getting the help that they need. Right. And there's no sign up form or anything. You just scan that. It should take you right to the page. I hope that is really helpful for you in getting the ball rolling on this and thinking a little differently about things. So I'm going to leave this up, but let's pause my talking. And let's go to your questions. So, Sharon, you asked me a question in a direct message, but I'm going to answer it for the whole group here. She asked, you ever work with schools to help parents understand what is happening with their children? This is something we do, actually. Jay, my business partner, does this a lot, and I do this as well. We talk to education foundations and nonprofits and schools about executive functions and what parents can do. And in some cases, schools have resources for this. We have trained those resources. In some cases, we've given them tools and training. And in many cases, it's just about talking to parents about this is a common problem, especially after COVID. And there are solutions to this problem. So thank you for that question, Sharon. And if anybody is interested in talking with me about how can I come into your school or your parent group or whatever, please just send me an email. That would be great. I love doing that. What other questions do we have? Feel free to come off mute or put your question in the chat. And I'm going to have a sip of tea.
Hi, Sheila. It's Khadija.
Hi, Khadija. Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you. Same here. Appreciate your time. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I feel a little perplexed as a parent that how did we go from our parents not being this involved in what we did, giving us instructions, and we used to follow them. And at this point, I feel like as parents, we're almost like enslaved to the emotions and feelings of our kid. How are they feeling now? Can I have this conversation or not? There are certain things that just need to be done.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm not feeling motivated enough. I'll do it some other time. And then that time doesn't happen. And then there's this, snowball effect of stress. And
Mhm.
you as a parent are just at the receiving end of it.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Um, yeah, I mean, there was a lot in that question. I'll do my best to unpack it a little bit, but I I'm gonna make the assumption that you were raised in a similar way. My parents had nothing to say about my academics except it better be good, right? They weren't managing my homework. They weren't getting involved when I had friend drama. They weren't helping me find motivation. It was, this is expected of you, you get it done, right? And there are a lot of reasons things have changed generationally. Um, and there's so much I can say here. I'm going to try to keep my answer a little succinct and maybe actionable. But I didn't enjoy being parented that way. And I don't know if you did, but I want things to be different for my kids. And whenever there is like a big generational shift, it's often the pendulum swings really far to the other side before we sort of find our bearings, right? And I definitely think that's happened with kids who are raised in, the 70s and 80s. Now we are parents. We want to have a better relationship with our children. And we maybe default to that other side of supporting too much, right? And so, again, we need to think about our role, right? Another thing that's happened is that the world has changed. Just think about how different the world is from like the early 80s to now, right? And like not even with COVID, but with the internet, with social media, with how competitive college admissions is, and how the competitive college environment has changed how high school works, and the changes in the SAT and the ACT. And there's so many other variables, right? We live in a much more global world, connected world. Kids are much more aware of the world earlier than I ever was, and so they are living through a different set of stressors, right? And so that's going to necessitate parents changing their role a little bit. And then you throw COVID in, where some students had 2 or 3 years out of a school, like a physical school system, out of an environment where they are being mentored by teachers and learning from their peers. There's a lot of isolation, there's a lot of anxiety, we have a mental health crisis, right? So we live in just a very, very different world, and it can be easy to like look back at your own upbringing and say, did I do something wrong that I have to be so much more hands-on than my parents ever were with me? But I think it's really important to take that bigger view and say, okay, this, whatever's happening right now, is a symptom of a lot of other things, some of which maybe you could control and a lot of which you couldn't, right? So it doesn't really help to get caught up in that, like, I don't know, blaming yourself for the situation that's here. What we do want to do is think about what can we control, right? How are there ways to turn the temperature down on things that are not so important and help your student focus on the things that actually are, right? There may be things that, like, in an ideal world, you would have them do them differently, but at the end of the day, the result is still okay. They're still like a happy, good kid. This is not so terrible if they just end up kind of stumbling along in this one area, right? And so sometimes it's about us letting go of certain things, and changing our expectations. I hope that's helpful. That's a really big question. It's very hard to answer, but I hope that that's helpful.
thank you. That is definitely very helpful. Appreciate it.
Great, great. Okay, Mai has a question here. Is there language you can suggest or phrases about how to encourage my child to not feel the stress of the competitiveness of college? Oof. Kids are super smart, talented, well-rounded, and so it becomes hard not to feel pressure to excel. And second question, how do you work to compose a list of colleges that are right instead of just applying to the colleges where everyone else is applying? Okay, so I'm going to address your first question here. And the second question, I did a whole talk on how to build a college list. Maybe I can send you that, or you can look at our past webinars and find that. We'll if nobody else has a question, I'll come back to it for sure. But that is an important piece of this. So the thing about this college competitiveness that's just in the air, right? They see their peers talking about it. It's in the media. It's just everywhere, right? No matter what you are saying to them about college, they're hearing these other messages too. And the thing that we are always trying to do with our students is help them have a set of their own values and their own definition of success so that they can see, oh, these rankings don't actually matter, or all these kids who want to go to the Ivy League, they may not have the same reasons that I have for wanting to go to college, right? And I'm not saying don't go to an Ivy League school. I did. But even I think my reasons for wanting to go were not right. And I could have actually been set up for success better by a different kind of college if I had known about myself a little bit more, right? So that's kind of my bigger answer. The more specific thing to do is actually to look at some data, right? We imagine that every kid who goes to a good college has to have, I don't know, founded their own nonprofit and cured cancer and like published a novel, like all these really amazing things. So we do hear about some things like that in the media, but the reason we hear about them is because they're extraordinary. If you actually look at the data of who is getting into colleges with what kind of grades and what kind of scores, you'll have a much more realistic picture of what it takes, right? It's not do everything to the highest level. It's actually understand what matters to you for your specific vision of success and pick the colleges that are going to serve you best, not just scramble to get into what everybody thinks is the best college. Right. So I think taking a data-driven approach can really help with that. I also think, things like LinkedIn can be really instructive. I often have students do this when they are sure that they want to do a certain career or a certain major or go to a certain school. I say, go on LinkedIn. And sometimes I even give them my login so they can see a little bit more. Search for people who went to the school and see what they're doing. Right. Oh, somebody is, I don't know who's not muted, but see what those people are doing. What do they all go on to do? Right. And they'll find they go on to do all sorts of things. Like people who went to quote unquote no-name schools go on to do amazing things. People who went to the biggest brand name schools sometimes still struggle to get a job or to be happy in their lives. Right. And same thing with majors and professions. Like there's so many paths to all these different things. So just sort of like crack open their perspective a little bit, that they need to be hearing from other voices. There's also a really great book kind of about this specific thing. It's called Never Enough. It came out last fall by Jennifer Brahaney Wallace. And it's a fantastic book with some like talk tracks and specific strategies that you can use with your own child. There's another question, maybe. I heard some people talking. I don't know if that's a question. I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, we'll go back to the other question about how to choose colleges.
Oh, I have a quick question on accountability.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
All right. So I wanted to understand how you build accountability in the program,
Yeah.
because one of the concerns that I have is that it's very likely that my kid would, after a couple of iterations of trying to change routine, might say, oh, this is all okay. The challenge is gone, or my routine is updated
Yeah.
without actually a true and meaningful change.
Yeah.
Right. So have you seen this, and how do you address that in your program?
Yeah. It's a great question. And it also brings me to mention something else that I think is really vital to the success of our coaching program is we partner with parents. Right. So that's a big part of it. Is a student can come to a session and tell me, oh yeah, I did it, it's perfect, my grades are great, but I am going to talk to their parent and see what's actually going on. What changes is the parent noticing or maybe not noticing? How are their grades? And in most cases, I would say 99% of cases, I'm also having students in the session log into their school portal, whether that's Blackbaud or Schoology or whatever it is that their school uses to manage grades and assignments. And they're screen sharing with me. We're looking at that together. So they know I'm going to look for the truth. And if they don't want to tell me the truth, that might mean something about, a sense of shame, something about them not believing that this relationship is working. Maybe I'm not the right fit, or something else that's taking up space in their brain. So they're not dedicating it to whatever this challenge is, right? So it's kind of that trust but verify approach. So we are going to talk to parents. We're going to look at grades. In many cases, our coaches are talking to students' teachers as well to get feedback on what's happening in the classroom, because we can't be there with them, right? But often it is just such a trusting relationship that students are really open with us about what they're scared of and what's really going on. So it's rare that students are trying to hide stuff from us, but we do have ways to sort of manage that. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much. That was very insightful.
It was a great question. Do we have other questions? Okay, well, we're right on time. So that's great. If you do have more questions, feel free to send me an email. You can call the office. We'll set up a time to talk, or you can browse our website for more resources. There's some great blogs, and you can get more information on, all the other stuff that we do, tutoring and test prep and college admissions. You can get some great blog posts on how to build a college list there too, if you're looking for that. But I really thank you for your time tonight. I hope this was helpful, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye, everybody.